You know something? Trials of Mana may be one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I had a feeling it would be ever since I completed my first run, but I wanted to let it sit for a while to be sure. It's now been a year since Trials of Mana released, and I still hold Trials of Mana high as one of the best RPGs. And apparently, I'm not alone. Square Enix recently celebrated the game hitting 1 million sales, which is quite rare for an RPG that isn't Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts. I must admit, I'm excited for the future of this franchise. I recently purchased a collection of Mana which includes 3 separate entries: Final Fantasy Adventure, Secret of Mana, and the original Trials of Mana. I'm also stoked for the upcoming port of Legend of Mana so that I don't have to shell out $200 for a PS1 copy. I may have to revisit this topic, but the Mana series itself may be one of my favorites in gaming. We'll see if I can still say that after completing more entries. Something about Trials of Mana that made me latch onto it was its simplistic execution with a modern polish, which I think is very important in making engaging RPGs. Games in this genre average 30, 50, even 70 hours long, so it means a lot when one of them keeps me on board until the credits roll, or better yet, returning for another playthrough. There are 2 surface-level aspects of the Mana series that I want to address, and they can be found in its predecessor, Final Fantasy Adventure. In 1990, Koichi Ishii was granted the opportunity to direct a Final Fantasy spin-off, which started as Gemma Knights, before changing into Seiken Densetsu, or Final Fantasy Adventure as it's known in the West. From a first impression, you can see 2 influences in Final Fantasy Adventure's design. Final Fantasy, of course, but also another franchise you might know, which goes by the name of The Legend of Zelda. Now, I can't prove if Zelda was a direct influence to this game, but I can make a strong case just by comparing the gameplay. The top-down view, the dungeons you explore, and the focus on free-flowing combat. Where it differed from Zelda were the features of casting spells, equipping your character with gear, and gaining EXP in battle. In other words, the staples of Final Fantasy. So this is perhaps the first reason why I'm drawn to Trials of Mana. It's because if you've watched my video on my history with Zelda, you'd know that I adore the Zelda franchise. And if you've watched the same video, you'd know I'm not too keen on Final Fantasy anymore. To emphasize on this, there are a select few Final Fantasy titles that I thoroughly enjoy, and of them, only one of them would rank among my favorite RPGs of all time. I'll be honest, I haven't enjoyed a single game in the series since Final Fantasy X, and even found myself drawn more to the appetizers that kept me waiting for the next Final Fantasy, rather than the entry itself. But what was it that caused me to jump ship? What did the spin-off do, and continues to do, that resonates well with my tastes, while the flagship franchise just leaves me bitter? Well, for starters, it doesn't take itself so damn seriously. Sure, there's drama and conflict, but you don't need a crash course to understand what's going on or what the purpose of the whole world is, like my latest punching bag, Final Fantasy 15, aka the game that's as vast as an ocean but as deep as a puddle. Unless you buy more products, of course. It's also nice that Trials of Mana is the complete package. Like I've stated before, Trials of Mana is a remake, but doesn't feel the need to chop up the experience and sell them separately like Square's newest cash cow, the Final Fantasy VII Expanded Universe. I'm honestly surprised you can still play through all 6 character campaigns without the inclusion of DLC, a cliffhanger, a movie tie-in, a book, a cartoon series. Yes, I'm still bitter about 15. Heck, there's even an Aftermath story free of charge, additional final boss and everything. Ha! Who'da thunk? Salty spittoon aside, Trials of Mana is a complete package. Number 1. To better add to its advantage, Trials of Mana really cuts down on a lot of JRPG fluff. Menus and tutorials appear during loading screens. Shortcuts for skills and specials help keep the combat flowing, and quickly swapping party members with a shoulder button adds some variety in gameplay. Sure, it's a bummer that the co-op got botched, but hell, it's not the first time couch co-op got the shaft, and it's not even the worst instance. Look, I don't want to keep ragging on newer Final Fantasies this whole time. If you enjoyed 12, 13, and 15, then I'm happy for you. No, really. One thing that I wish would change with YouTube creators is to get rid of this stupid, I hate this and you should too mentality, and instead normalize, hey, it's not for me, but I'm happy others like it. That being said, I want to pinpoint what makes Trials my personal preference. So another common complaint I hear is the voice acting, but it's varying degrees of decency. Hawkeye, Gormand, and Belladonna have some intriguing gusto with their performance, whereas other characters like Charlotte...
Trials of Mana.
She tried. I'm just gonna switch the voices to Japanese. Problem solved. Trials of Mana doesn't focus so hard on reinventing the wheel, which is perhaps its greatest strength. Rather, it chooses to polish mechanics and features that have been utilized in many other action JRPGs like skill points, menu shortcuts, combos, in-game maps, dodge rolls. Oh, it's all good. It doesn't look like cutting-edge technology, but the cel-shaded look makes it look like a late GameCube or PS2 game. And hey, that era had some of the best games of all time if you ask me. Trials of Mana also has a high replayability factor. Not only are there 6 different campaigns to choose from, but each character also has a multitude of classes to utilize. It gets to the point where you can mix and match your party to make each playthrough different from the last. I've only cleared 2 campaigns thus far and have a third one planned for gaming cats and dogs in the future, which is more than I can say for some other RPGs that try to incorporate multiple campaigns. I started by playing as Angela with Duran and Reese on standby, while Amanda's first playthrough consisted of Reese with Kevin and Hawkeye. Although we explored the same areas and faced the same bosses, our experiences had quite a few differences. For starters, some NPCs played a bigger role depending on the characters we've chosen. Crimson Wizard was the main focus in Angela's story, and an antagonist who made a number of appearances, but he was only mentioned by name maybe once or twice during Amanda's run. Instead, Belladonna and Malocchio drove the plot forward in her playthrough, whereas that vampire dude just showed up randomly in a cave during my run, and I had no idea what his purpose was and wondered why the hell he never appeared again. What makes this important depends on the characters you choose. They will either react to these NPCs with their own additional dialogue, or just stand there like a plank of wood. The game also really opens up when it comes to taking on the Benevodons, which can be tackled in any order with the exception of Zabelfar, who you will always face last. And these bosses are some of the most creative, intricate, and unique encounters out of the entire RPG genre. Definitely one of the game's highlights. Overall, Trials of Mana is just fun to play and it goes by at a brisk pace. No area lingers on for too long, and backtracking gets cut down once you rescue Vuskov and Flammy. I'm curious if the entire series will stack up to this quality. But for the longest time I've heard that Seiken Densetsu is one of the greatest RPGs, not just for the Super Nintendo, but also considered the best of all time. And you know what? Playing the remake? I agree. So here's to the Mana series. I wish you the brightest of futures.